So let's talk about BattleTech maps, right? So the last four scenarios in the Death from Above handbook, they have to be created by hand because the person who was creating the maps is not on the project anymore. They didn't have time or whatever, and they were using a rather nice program, Heavy Metal Map Maker Pro. And it's apparently an officially licensed program by Catalyst Game Labs and all those guys. And so it comes up, and when you use that thing, you end up with maps that have the official BattleTech logo and whatever else on them. And it's a pretty neat program. However, it costs money. Not like, $5-10 money, but $30-40 money. And this is a fan project, and a lot of this is done on our own time with our own dollars. I know I've put probably, oh Jesus, I think I may have put 80 hours in right now. So, just doing the layout and some of the associated additional illustrations. So that's no small amount of time. Or money from the people who are doing it. I mean, it really isn't. So you look at the maps. And last night I pulled out a map. It took about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that, to put together the map by hand. I'd already done some prep work with a Photoshop file. Now the standard BattleTech map is a 17 by 22 piece of paper or cardboard or what have you. That's the standard size. Right, technically, it's even a little smaller than that. I want to say it's supposed to be like 16 by 21. Those are the technical specs. But because it's printed on what's essentially standardized sheets, it fits that 17 by 22, which is 4 8.5 by 11 pieces of letter-sized paper, which would normally be trimmed in a printing press into 4 pieces of paper, but you can get it plot sized at the 22-inch width for like large programs and folding things and whatever. And so that paper stock is what the maps are typically printed on. And from there, in order to make our own, I needed to look at a couple things. So there's 15 rows by like 17 rows. It's a little odd number. And you get basically 15 and a half in one direction, and you actually get one more because you're cutting off the hexes on either side, and they actually bleed over on the top, right? So you actually have less than one on one. So you actually have 14 and a half, and then you have like whatever and a half. And that way, the maps are designed so that you can place them end to end, and you get whole hexes that are kind of like non-numbered, like transition hexes. But that's how you get the map edges, so that you can stick the maps right next to each other and continue to play. So I used a hex generating program that creates perfect hexes in the rough correct size. Did the math and then expanded them out. Because the BattleTech hex is, they say it's like 1.25, but I'm not sure how they're measuring that. If that's a radial distance to the longest point or across or what, but it's like 1.26 inches. So I don't have to know the exact measurement. What I do have to know is how many hexes you get side to side, top to bottom. As long as the same number of hexes is present, the measurements should be exactly the same, right? That's that reverse logic, right? When you have x plus y equals z, well, if I have z, then theoretically x plus y should be the same. And so that's the approach we're taking. I plan to test it out. I'm going to try printing it out today at work. And then I'm going to take those maps home and compare them to the maps that I have in the actual BattleTech box set, just to make sure that they actually correctly fit. And I'm pretty sure they do. The officially licensed ones I'm not as worried about because they're supposed to be an officially licensed print-it-yourself product. So for the creation of the whole thing, I set up a document that's the correct size at 17 by 22. And then I set it at 300 DPI, which is photo quality, which is nice. It's nice high resolution. Understandably, though, we're looking at a flat, matte-colored map, no shinies. And it's like a topo map. And real topo maps have a very low resolution, right? Realistically, we're talking computer screen resolution, 72 to 96 DPI. It's not much. And so the files at that size actually come out relatively small. However, when you're doing 300 DPI at the large size, the Photoshop files are enormous. My two tests were 300 megabytes to 400 megabytes. The map one for the episode 9 actually was 980 something megabytes. Right? They will not sync with our share drive that we use for community work, for collaboration. Because there's a max file size limit of like 250 megs, which even the completed project, the book that we're using Microsoft Publisher to create, is still way under that. It's like 96 megabytes, right? And it's like, rapidly inflating. Every time I add something to it, it adds like another 6 to 10 pages, which you wouldn't think would be a whole lot, but when you start adding everything together, it rapidly ballooned. I figured we'd have 200 pages, but I discounted how long some of our fiction was. I figured it would be all similarly sized. So we have that same problem with the maps. So with the maps themselves, we come to a dilemma soon enough, once we get the appendix and everything done. And that dilemma is, how do we make these available to the player? I can put little preview images and take up a whole page so you can get a preview of what the map looks like and understand the deployment of your troops generically. But how do I make the map available to you at home with this manual? I mean, that's the goal, right? So you can play these campaigns at home. And so I have to make a few assumptions of sorts, right? And I'm going to have to include some instructions. I mean, the default dumb way to do it would be to include the actual 17 by 22 map as a whole page in the book, which would A, make printing of the book impossible, and B, would make printing of the actual maps mostly impossible for people unless they wanted to go pay somebody at Staples, or one of those office stores, FedEx or whatever, who has some of this stuff so that they can print it. And they're going to charge you $5 a map or something. This was not an exorbitant price, but I don't want people to have to fork out, $40-80 to print supplementary materials. To me, I want you to be able to print it at home. I want you to be able to just, load it up in the printer and print it out and then have a damn good time. And so that brings us to dividing the maps. So the maps, of course, like I mentioned, are essentially a multiple of 8.5 by 11, standard lettered size. And so the obvious solution is just to cut it into 4 pieces. That is essentially what we're going to do. Now, there's another step we're going to add on there, and I'm going to explain why. You can divide the map into 8.5 by 11, but most printers don't do edge to edge. And even if you do, printers are a little funny, right? You're going to end up with these 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, and then you're going to have to literally match them edge to edge with a piece of tape on the back or whatever, or on the front, such that they perfectly line up. And printing is an analog process. It's never precise. Laser printers are better, but not everybody has a color laser printer, right? Not everybody has the $500 to $1,000 for a nice color laser printer, and they're $100 cartridges. A black and white printer should be enough, and because they're topo maps, they are going to work black and white. There's color differentiation, and where there's not, there's markings to tell you that there's a transition of height, right? That way you can make the judgments even with black and white. But there's still this issue, right? You got to line these stupid freaking maps up, and when you're done, you have these pissy seams that are wibbly wobbly. I mean, you can put it on a piece of cardboard or even on a table, and that's going to do you. But it's imperfect, and it's essentially the same as those cheap paper maps that you get from Catalyst Game Labs, but they use a much thicker stock, which is nice. A map type stock, and it's still not perfect. It doesn't feel right. So I'm going to add a 5th page for each map, which is going to include a couple of things: the instructions on how to use the map, which is basically just how you print it. But most importantly, it's actually got 4 strips on it. I'm looking at 1.5 or 2 inch wide strips right now. I'm not sure which I'm going to do. I think I'm probably going to do 1.5. That way they take up 6 inches of space with space between them. We're talking another 3/4 inch. So it's going to take up 7.25 inches of an 8.5 and 11 by piece of paper, which is perfect. It gives you room to cut. And these strips are essentially the meeting place of the maps and the seams, right? So you can line the stupid maps up, and even if you get the edge imperfect, you can print out these little seam strips and tape them over the top to get rid of the seam so that you don't have broken hexes. And there's another reason for that, right? Because that's assuming you still have edge-to-edge printing. Most people don't have edge-to-edge printing. And when they print it, the PDF is going to shrink it to fit the printable area, which is no good. That screws up the scale. The hex spaces of your battle mechs won't fit. So we need that edge-to-edge printing. So we'll include instructions on how to set it to print full size, and it's going to cut stuff off on the edges. Typically, you're going to lose 1/4 inch on the edge, where the inkjet or even a laser doesn't go. And so again, that's where these strips come in, right? Because if you've got 4 pieces of paper with 1/4 inch borders, you can't match the hexes up. You're missing data. You're missing hexes. You're missing information. So that's where these strips come in. With that 1.5 inch size, right, you cross that 1/4 inch gap by 1/4 inch on each side. So you've got overlap. So you can basically just cut that strip out, tape it where it matches on the top piece, or the top left piece, and then tape it on the bottom. And now you've got the bridge between the 2 maps. You've got that hex distance. Now they're not going to be, because these also have that same problem, we're going to lose 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch on each side. So we're going to have a total loss of 1/2 inch. So they're ideally going to be done from the center of the map out, where you lose a 1/2 inch. But that 1/2 inch is usually on the end hex, which is cut in half anyway. So there's no real loss of data there. There's no real loss of information. And then you can do the same thing from the middle to the top and out. And you've got just enough overlap to be able to tell what it is. And if you were to put maps together like this, you could theoretically do it still. You'd probably have to print your own little edge border between them for linking, but you've got enough data. And all of the Death from Above maps are designed to be played on a single map, right? The scale is pretty small. already starting off in long red with long range on their weapons to start with. And fun thing about the Death from Above maps, right? On the overhead cameras, if you count the hexes, the maps are about 25% smaller than a standard BattleTech map, which forced them to maneuver a lot, which is interesting. So when I'm actually doing the maps, I'm actually adding additional information that's in the spirit of the map, because nothing fits. There's no direct one-to-one correlation. So anyway, that's how you're going to print the maps, right? You're going to have 4 primary pieces that you're going to tell, Adobe Acrobat to print a certain way. And then there's a piece you're going to print out and then cut out the strips so that you can have the nice map in between, as nice as you can get. Now, if you've got one of those fancy edge-to-edge printers, freaking awesome. Fantastic. Print it up, make it beautiful, line it up, put it on some cardboard. Yeah, baby. It's perfect. I will also include like a supplemental map pack for those who want it, which is the actual 17 by 22, in case you do want to take it to an actual printer and have it produced. It'll be that easy for those who want to spend the money. And there are some people who I think are going to want to do that because, BattleTech fans are a little nutty like that. So anyway, that's how I'm approaching the maps. And I've got 3 more to go. Right? Today is Thursday. I'm hoping to get the next one out. That'll be 3, 4. I should have all 4 done by Saturday. And then I'll be able to get back on the layout with the scenarios themselves. The last half of Saturday. And so by Sunday, I think I can have all the scenarios done. And then after that, it's time to start proofing, making some minor adjustments, spelling adjustments, things like that, double-checking the work. And I will start doing probably the first accessibility pass on Monday. I'm hoping to actually get it done in one sitting. And what that's going to allow us to do is, one of my chief bitches about PDFs, that I think everybody who's ever taken a class with a PDF and had it read to them, is that a lot of times the text is not properly linked, so it skips around. And we have a few people in the community who are colorblind or who have vision issues, right? So by making it handicapped accessible that way, by making sure that the text-to-speech will function, it's going to help them a lot. I've already added alt text to everything, but I'm going to be going back and giving that another pass-through. I think I want to be a little more verbose on what they're looking at to give them a little more descriptive. And that's about it. I mean, once that's done, the plan is to print essentially to create 2 different versions. There's going to be the Death from Above ebook edition for use by most people, which you can load up on a Kindle or your cell phone or whatever, or even at home and use just fine. It's going to be lower resolution. It's going to be like 96 to 120 DPI. It'll still look fantastic on the screen. And that's what counts, right? Because that's where you're going to be viewing it. The other version will be the I want to take this to the printer and get it done version. And I'm not sure whether that's going to retain the original 300 DPI resolution or if I'm going to scale that down to 180. Because printing is an analog process, most of the time, the difference between 300 and 180 is not going to be visible for most people. It's just not. And especially when you're dealing with printing yourself and we don't know the real quality of everything, paying for the extra 120 DPI isn't necessarily going to get you anything. And honestly, most of the illustrations are designed to look analogish in some ways anyway. So cutting them down to 180 dpi is not going to hurt the quality of the book. It'll also make it much more manageable file size-wise. And that'll make it easier for people just to download wherever. And so that's what we're going to have 2 editions. And the big difference isn't just the DPI. The dumb difference is that one of them is going to have an extra page in it. And the reason for that is, if you take the Battletech book to a printer, it's got to have an even number of pages because it's got the cover, the back cover, and all the pages in between. And they have to be back to back, right? So there's an even number of pages no matter what you do. With a PDF, there's no such compunction, no such requirement. And so we'll just have an extra page for the printed version. It's just going to be a blank page at the front. And then that's literally it, an extra page in higher resolution. And that makes it printable as a book. Kind of goofy, really. But that's the state of the matter. The other is that, like, because if you view a PDF in 2-page spread because you like doing that on an iPad or other similarly ratioed 4:5 ratio device, you can do that 2 pages on one screen thing. And if you don't have an odd number of pages on the digital version, you actually end up viewing, how do I want to put this? The corners don't match. You end up viewing right page and left, not left and right, which puts a weird line down the middle of your screen, right? Because we have corners with stuff on them, and it looks really weird. So that's the other reason you do subtract the page on the digital version, so that when you do the 2-page view, you actually view the correct pages. So, we're coming rapidly to the close of the project here. I'm hoping that with everything we do, we can actually drop the completed PDF this next Friday with everything complete. The biggest challenge is once we get all that stuff done, there's a few other things. Is I need to get a bunch of record sheets and stuff to put in the back half, but that's not going to take much. The only thing I am debating on right now for people at home is whether or not I want to include a bunch of little tokens and counters for people to use for vehicles, because we really don't have any, and there's a lot of tanks and infantry. So I'm thinking about including counters for tanks and infantry that you can print out and cut out, so you can actually just, play the game without having any additional materials. The only materials you should need to play the game, as far as I'm concerned, the Death from Above campaign, are the original box set, and that's it. I mean, there's the RPG books and things, and you can have those too. Those should be good. But with the inclusion of the basic Tristat DX stuff in there, you should be able to play the game pretty much with only the Battletech box set. And that's the goal. So, I hope this was informative. If you have questions, let me know. Preferably over Twitter, because I am going to put this on YouTube, but it's a terrible platform for answering questions. So you can hit me up there on the YouTubes. And then I'll be talking with our stocker or whoever else about where we're going to host this. I suspect we're going to host it on my website, because if I have the whole DFA community downloading off my box drive, they're going to shut it down. They won't like that. So, here we go. Hope you all have a wonderful day.